everybody. Welcome back to More Than You Can Handle. Our guest today comes to us from Charlotte, North Carolina. He's a good friend of mine. He's a hilarious comedian. He is currently blowing up on TikTok and Instagram. He's also a regular at the Comedy Zone in Charlotte, does stand-up all over. Mr. Jonathan Williams.
Hey
buddy.
There. Hello, how's it going, Jeremy? That's
Good,
Mr.
man.
Williams Comedy. Thanks for mentioning the handle. Appreciate that. Good start.
Right, it's all downhill from here, buddy. Thanks for doing the show, man.
Yeah, man, happy to do it.
You grew up religious, right?
I grew up very, very religious. Yeah.
Tell us about it.
All right. Let's see. Preacher's kid.
What denomination?
So I'll back up a little bit. It's Presbyterian, but my dad was a practicing pastor before I was born, and then wasn't for a while. Still very much Christian and everything, but then when I was 15, he found a church. A church found him, whatever, and it was a Presbyterian church in name, but it was in the mountains, so it had its own little special flavor to it. There was speaking in tongues. There was everything. Nothing you'd associate with Presbyterian at all.
Right. Interesting. Okay. This
Not
was
the case at
mountains
all.
of North Carolina?
Yeah,
Appalachian?
Avery County. Avery County,
right.
Little town no one's ever been to called Plumtree. Not a plum tree to be found.
So y'all live there?
We lived there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd say up to that point I was kind of religious just cuz I just was, that was my family, and that's what I was doing, and I was afraid of hell and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I just was. Right around that point, I started getting rebellious. I backslid there for a minute. Started doing all the bad stuff that you're not supposed to do.
What was this? Second grade, third grade?
This was I was 15. 15.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. No, I did. The stuff when when people do their testimony, right?
Yeah.
This is the chapter where it was I got into drinking, got into smoking weed, partying, and just lost my way, but God didn't give up on me then. That kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Ended up finding my way back into it.
Were y'all in this small mountain town this whole time, through high school?
Yeah, so I went to I'm from Greenville, South Carolina originally.
Okay.
And I went to public school up through third grade, and then started going to this school that I still have a hard time really quite describing. It was called the Providence Center for Classical Studies. And yeah, a lot to unpack there. And it was very much a Christian school, very evangelical. They really focused on being anti-Catholic, which was a special flavor.
What's more classical than that?
Yeah, you're right. You literally, it's not like Latin is the official language or anything. You literally had, my parents had to sign a whatever contract, I don't know what the word for it would be, saying that they were supporters of the Protestant Reformation. Yeah, dude. This place was wild.
They had to get that on paper.
That had to be on paper. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then and then went to a different Christian school, again Presbyterian focused, for middle school. Then finally went to public school for 9th grade, and loved it. And I had found my spot, I found my people.
You finally met some papists.
That's right. Just Catholics for days. Started going to mass. It was, oh man, it was hardcore. No, that's where the real backsliding began. But so I really liked it there. And then my parents were like, we're going to go ahead and move to the mountains, and move 100 miles away and 100 years back in time. It was wild. I got there and I was like, people really talk like this? There were plenty of great people there, don't get me wrong, but it was true culture shock. I was like, Yuns, we're doing this? This is real?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was when we moved.
How did you feel about growing up a pastor's kid?
I didn't really think of myself that way until we moved, until he was back in a church again. Because he was not a practicing pastor, still ordained and everything, of course, but not a practicing pastor until I was 15.
Okay. So you went to the mountains, really?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why to Plumtree Presbyterian Church. I'll call them out. I don't give a shit. Are we swearing on this? Oh. I didn't ask you about that before.
Yeah, no, I'll bleep it out.
You'll beep it? Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I've got a huge audience of impressionable children
Gotcha.
for this.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
Papists and Protestants alike.
The Papists don't care. The Protestants have a problem with the language issue.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So that's wild, man. That's a big deal at a big time of life.
Mm-hmm.
To move to the middle of nowhere.
I was pretty furious, especially after I'd finally found like a spot where I felt like okay. Right? And then I was like, we're going.
So then you get there, and what happens? You're the pastor's kid.
Okay, so that's
in the mountain town.
So the good thing, the way I framed it to myself was I get to kind of just be whoever I want now, right? I can go in like sort of just
you're starting fresh, clean slate.
Fresh, right?
Yeah.
And so I leaned into to answer your question about feeling how I felt about being a pastor's kid. I leaned hard into the rebellious pastor's kid identity, like pretty fast.
Yeah.
Really good weed in the mountains. It turns out. That's what I learned.
Shout out Plumtree.
Yeah. So that first year I was there was very much like, screw you, mom and dad, screw church, all that stuff. Then got like mad depressed, like crazy levels of depressed. Like people at school like thought I was like cool at first, and then I'm not sure what happened, but at a certain point they all turned on me. And so like it was really odd. I don't really know why. I don't know what happened. I still have not really figured that out. But so then like towards the end of that year, I had
what do you mean they turned on you? What did that look like?
Like at first it was just like I was like a novelty, right?
Sure.
From quote unquote off the mountain.
Oh wow!
And
they have a term for people.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was like, the sentence was said to me more than once by adults. You ain't from around here, are you? Like that. That's like that whole deal.
That's when you run.
It's real deal.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. Then I just became like, I don't really know how to describe it. Like all of a sudden they were just like, oh, actually you're lame. And we don't, and so I started getting like really like lonely in that, because like even my like rebellious thing I was doing was like, oh, I don't get the validation from that end either. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And I had like kind of like a dramatic return to the faith then, in like a way, like kind of I one night like really like broke down, like crying, like all of that stuff, like the full on like, I'm returning to the Lord, all that, right?
Where did this happen? Like this was in church or
in our house?
At your house, okay.
Yeah, and went to my parents and admitted everything I was doing and all that. And I don't know how much of a monologue do you want from me here about
all of it.
about my journey?
This is what this is about. So what age is this? You have this kind of
16
transformation. Okay,
16.
Were your parents thrilled?
Oh, they were overjoyed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They were like so proud of me, and like, and you know, it felt very, very, very real. Like that was when the faith that I, no longer really have, but at that time felt, I mean, extremely like this, like there was no doubt in my mind that the reality that I was embracing was reality. You know what I'm saying? Like in a way that it never was before that, and really at a certain point stopped being that way, and I never got back to that. So like,
what did you understand that you were embracing at the time?
Yeah, good question. That, I mean, the sort of overall evangelical model, right? Of there was, the Bible is like literally true, but then the additional things that are brought to the table of we are sinners, we need salvation, Jesus literally died for us, and his death literally saved the world, but you have to embrace it, all of that stuff. Sort of in a middle ground between the free will Baptist stuff and the predestination stuff. And you have to return to him and repent and ask for forgiveness, and there is heaven and there is hell. And the stakes are this. That's the wildest thing looking back, is how high the stakes feel. Like, it felt like this is not only the most important thing in life, this is the only important thing in life. Everything else either contributes to or takes away from the dramatic battle of, and a lot of battle metaphor.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff.
So how'd your life change?
In a pretty big way.
Yeah.
I'm
sure that made you a lot of friends.
Actually, the real irony of this whole thing is that part of what so much happened after that reinforced my return to the faith and made later years leaving, I think, all the more difficult, was that I really did, like, people were a lot nicer to me after all that. Like, I became something in the ballpark of, like, popular or whatever you want to call it. Kind of, like, I was generally well liked and found, like, friend group that I was part of and had a lot of fun with. And a lot of that came with Young Life, right? So I got really, really heavy into Young Life, which, man, they have a brilliant model of. Do you know Young Life well?
I was never involved in it, but I have lots of friends that have been.
Yeah. So it's truly different, at least, and to my knowledge, it's different from any other of the sort of youth-focused organizations. Because they do, and this is kind of what, in retrospect, kind of infuriates me about it, but their approach is truly brilliant at getting kids in the door. Like, they embrace, secular culture in a big, big way that other organizations never did. Like, you go to like the meetings, they called them club, and you sing like popular current songs, like on the radio, and then you sing the Christian songs. You know what I mean? Like, and it's very, their motto was always like, meet kids where they are, right? So it's very, and so the cool kids would be part of it. The popular kids would be part of it. Let me back up. The cool white kids would be part of it. The popular white kid, which was really all my school was in the mountains anyway. But so they have this model that just really, it's really seductive, like truly, in a way that none of the other ones ever were to me. And so that became a big part of my life, big part of my identity. Then, like, people at school I started getting along with better, and it all just felt very real, and I just kept getting lots of levels of confirmation of, not only was this the best thing for my life, but, like, this is real. This is it. This is the deal. And then, like, I'd say around college-ish area, that sort of started to very, very, very slowly dissipate. And
But it carried you through high school.
Through high school, through college, like, till I was 28, 29.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to Appalachian State for a year.
Okay.
And that was just too close to home,
Yeah.
And I ended up going to Chapel Hill. But a big part of sort of the beginning of the sort of disillusion of the faith, disillusionment, which was literally over a decade process. This wasn't like the thing where a college freshman is like, oh, I learned stuff in college, now I have radically changed my whole worldview. It's not that. It wasn't that kind of thing at all. Sort of the beginning of looking back, I think there's more to it, but my dad was like ousted from the church. That, like, it was talk about turning on people. Like, this church like brought him in and like embraced us as a family seemingly and all this stuff. But what was going on beneath the surface that I didn't know, and I still don't know all the details of this, there could be more to it than I know. Essentially, like, this idea of this off the mountain guy, right? This outsider they just, for lots of reasons, some of which I understand, some of which I don't, they just ended up basically saying like, we don't trust you. We think you're like, it was this high stakes battle stuff, right? It was like this, the Lord is telling us that you are not meant for this place, that you are, I don't know all the language they use and everything, but basically like,
Was he too liberal or what?
I guess, which is laughable,
Yeah.
to me.
Uh-huh.
He's by no stretch a liberal guy, but for them, maybe,
Yeah.
and maybe just liberal sort of like feel almost. He went to Yale, like
Oh, okay.
just like maybe elitist seeming to
Sure.
them, which
Okay.
is also not something I would really describe him as. But so anyway, for all of these reasons that I don't fully understand, but I kind of do, kind of don't, he was ousted. And that sort of was like took one little piece out of the Jenga tower, you know what I mean? Where I was
Yeah.
kind of like, wait, this isn't how Christians aren't supposed to treat each other this way. Hold on, what's going on here? And then when I went to Chapel Hill, I became a Young Life leader, right,
Oh.
and what I learned then is that being a Young Life leader was way less fun than being a kid in high school. I just didn't enjoy it. It was weird. I
Yeah.
didn't like the feeling of like going to the high school to like meet kids. Like I just didn't like it. And also, there was something similar happened there. They ended up like ousting the director of that area, of the area director of that like chapter of Young Life or whatever, because of a theological dispute. And so I watched that happen too, and I was like, what is happening? Like, I don't know, like that was really odd to it was really odd to see it as truly a theological dispute. Like there was a point that was disagreed upon by the organization and the guy and the area director. Like it was like he was sort of pushing in the direction of being like a universalist, sort of, a little bit. He said he wasn't, but like a little bit in the direction of like at the end of the day everyone's going to be saved kind of a thing,
Right.
which sort of flew in the face of the Young Life. They literally had like a prescribed almost like curriculum that you would go through, where that would end with what they called the sin talk, where it was all about like how you have to decide whether or not to embrace this love that's being offered to you, this forgiveness being offered to you, and everything. So they just couldn't square those things away. And I remember just thinking like,
what's gonna motivate you to embrace this love?
right,
If,
right.
if you're not scared as shit going to hell.
That's right. That's right. And see, and the brilliance of that organization is that they never really framed it as hell. They never really talked about hell, right? They never made it truly scary. But I realize now that is what they were talking about. Right? Yeah. So it's this weirdly sort of insidious thing, and and then I think where some of the parallels between you and me, which I'd love to like hear your side of all this, is like, I mean, I think there's some already probably, but just from conversations we've had before. But in all this time, started dating now my ex-wife / co-parent, and I think that was part of what, even though I was like really like my faith was really starting to dissipate by the time I kind of got out of college, but I was still with someone who was very much a believer still, and I think that kept me in it in a lot of ways. And then we ended up getting married, and I just sort of clung to this faith that I didn't really feel anymore for another 5 or 6 years, till I remember one time deciding that I wasn't going to pray or read the Bible or anything for 2 weeks. I remember deciding this, and just see how I felt. And I did that, and then at the end of that 2 weeks, I was like, nothing feels different. And that was like kind of the end, I think. And then kind of along with that, not necessarily totally entangled with each other, but certainly entangled to a large degree. That's when my sort of marriage started falling apart as well. And that was all pretty dramatic as it always is. And I came out of the marriage also no longer considering myself to be a Christian. And since then, I've stayed that way pretty much, but I still don't really know exactly what I believe and what I don't. I feel quite confident that the version of God, and more specifically of Jesus, that I believed in, feel pretty confident that that's not real. Beyond that, I'm not quite sure. That's kind of where I'm at. That's somehow I can call that the short version, even though we're 24 minutes into this.
How long have you been in that space?
Yeah. So that was about 6 or 7 years ago. And
did that create any kind of spiritual vacuum in you that you filled with anything else, or did you just feel like that's out and my life goes on?
More of the second thing.
Yeah.
It was an immense relief to feel like, oh, I can just let life be life.
Yeah.
And it also freed me up to embrace things that I already truly thought. Like, for example, just like a sort of obvious example would be something like homosexuality, right? I was always like that. Like, it never made sense to me, the idea of that being wrong, right? But it was very built in to the version of Christianity that I was in.
Yeah.
And being able to be done with that and just be like, okay, now I accept that as a thing that people are, and why, and who cares.
Yeah.
Right? Things like that.
Yeah.
And not having... I still have a lot of... I certainly still have a lot of fear of what if it all is true? What if there is hell? What if there is, all of that? I don't believe that in my head, but I still believe it in like my lizard brain. You know what I mean? Because that's not going anywhere. You know what I mean? That's deep. That's from when I was a little teeny tiny kid.
Yeah. That's part of the hardware now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the short of it.
Was there anything from that kind of past spiritual self that was good that you have integrated into your life now? Or was it all something you felt like you need to let go of?
So one sort of void that was left, I think, was there were experiences that I had of God, or what I believe God to be, or whatever, that were very, there's no other word for it than transcendent. Like, you probably know this feeling, like when you really believe this stuff and you're in the right headspace, often it's music during like praise music and all of that stuff, and just all kinds of different times where I felt true transcendence, like bliss, ecstasy, like I did miss that, I look back on those moments as strange, but also as powerful and kind of beautiful. So I do miss...
Do you feel like, is there part of you that feels like you were in contact with something real and true that you want to get back to? Or
that's a very good question. That is something I wonder about. And it's not something I really worry myself too much with most of the time. Because I think there was something. Just any experience that, and it could just be sort of, just the miracle of human consciousness and what I'm willing to call things miracles. I don't feel like it. I don't feel like there necessarily has to be a intelligent divine being for something to be so amazing, so overwhelmingly beautiful and mysterious that I'll still call it a miracle, if that makes sense. Like the universe is a miracle. Like, I don't care if someone made it or not. In that sense.
So you still have like a sense of kind of awe and wonder towards the world. Yeah.
And I'm able, and what I like now is being able to just have that without having to tie it to something apocalyptic, and mean, and I don't have to have this like feeling of like, this is great, but man, there's that other place, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though I still have that fear, and I, haven't, like, I don't embrace that fear and that belief anymore.
Yeah.
I've found some sort of sense of ritual here and
Yeah.
there, I think. What is the audience
Like
for
what?
this podcast?
Like what?
'Cause-
I don't know. They're gonna find it. I don't
Okay.
know. But this is one of my questions for people. Is
Yeah.
like, do you have any kind of practices or rituals, or spiritual community that you're
Yeah.
a part of?
So I think we'll decide, let's mark the time on this one so I can decide later if I want this to not be part of what you release.
Yeah.
30 minutes and
I got it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this has just been in the last year and a half, and particularly in the last 6 months, something like that, have started taking psilocybin mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
In like and not just a microdose, in a more significant dose to, have the full experience, right? And that has been very, very profound thing in my life.
Huh.
Like truly, truly beautiful in a way that I knew that it was like going to be cool. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I anticipated that.
Yeah.
But what I didn't really anticipate was the level of, it really creates a sense of, I've always believed, or at least believed ever since I've sort of gotten out of the world of evangelical Christianity, that I've embraced the idea, because it's just a literal fact. It can sound really hippie and cosmic and whatever, but it's just a literal fact that we are pieces of the universe, right? Like that's just scientifically true. And I think the experience on mushrooms has really made me internalize that fact that, like, this really is all one thing. And I am just one piece of it. And that really, having the experience of truly embracing that and embracing everything that comes with, which is awe and beauty and also fear. I felt like I've faced both literal and internal fears. Because it's a hallucinogen. Like, you see stuff, right? It's not like you're not seeing like purple dinosaurs and shit, but like things are behaving visually strangely, right? And you feel it physically. You feel it on a lot of levels. Really sensing that, like, everything is truly connected. I've let go of a lot of things, and I've faced a lot of things in a way that I really didn't anticipate. And so that's been, I'm trying to be careful with that, because you can get, it's a chemical. It can, if you go too far into that, it can get weird. But
do you do it within a ritual context or a communal context, or are you just doing it by yourself, or what?
I've done it mostly by myself. And there's not a true ritual to it, but I have gotten to a place where it's like, all right, let's just see what this does. I take it seriously, and it's still fun. But like, I'm really kind of like, all right, show me what you want to show me, And I've had some really...
Who are you talking to?
I don't know.
You're just kind of putting that out there, like, whatever.
I think the universe.
Yeah.
I think, but also, a little bit more broadly, just like, whatever's there.
So you're expecting some kind of spiritual, mystical experience, or hoping for that, or
I'm open. I'm opening myself up to it.
Yeah.
I don't demand it. I've gotten to a place where I don't demand anything of it. I did recently have the first time where I've had what what I'd roughly describe as a bad trip. It wasn't like absolute horrifying nightmare, like whatever, but something I've heard and read and everything is that you have to be in the right mindset, right? To do this responsibly. And that really turned out to be true, because this time, it was a week ago. I just was like, I hadn't started. I was about to start the job that I just started this week, and so I was excited, but I was nervous, you know, because it's a new job, it's a big thing, it's a lot of changes coming up soon, and so I was in a little bit of an anxious mindset. So I did them. And it was weird. It was like twofold. I had a pretty profound, actually extremely profound experience where I was sort of exploring just the idea that like whatever your experience is reality because you're experiencing it. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Like just the very fact that you are experiencing something means it's real, even if it's not real in the sense of being externally solid, you know? And that sounds just so sort of basic to say it like that, but it was really, and then at a certain point, things started feeling a little sinister around me. And so I had to like, I was like, okay, I'm ready for this to be done. And I was like, all right, I get it, guys, mushrooms, I get it. Self-discovery, all of that. Can we stop being spooky now though, please? The ceiling fan really isn't my friend right now. Like,
Did they listen?
No, I had to handle that one myself. I had to go out in the living room and watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which even though, listen, I know it's propaganda, but it still is a very fun show. And so I like stayed up and watched that and like stopped looking at things because they were moving weird, and honestly, almost a week since then, I'm still kind of seeing some stuff here and there.
Wow.
So I'm taking a little break.
Yeah. Yeah. It is really interesting to me how common that people report that experience on mushrooms of feeling like everything is connected.
Yeah,
and they're a part of it. That is such a yeah.
Have you, or do you want to say like?
Yeah, no, I did mushrooms once. Gosh, maybe a decade ago.
Okay. What was your experience?
I did not. It wasn't that profound.
Yeah.
It was more comical.
Yeah, it is also very funny.
Yeah.
That's also true.
Like I was with my brothers and my cousin, and we were like out in the woods, and I just remember like, you know, their faces turning into like cartoon characters. And you know, I remember looking at the stars, and they were like multicolored. It was like Christmas lights in the sky. And I remember it felt like I was walking on marshmallows. And
right.
It was like I was in some kind of weird video game. You know, I honestly don't know I don't know the different types of mushrooms. I just took what my brothers said to take because they're way more experienced with that kind of stuff. But I remember it being a good experience.
Yeah.
And like something that I totally wanted to do again. It wasn't anything that I sought out, but I was like, oh, if I get the chance, especially if I'm with people, I would try it again. But I have a lot of friends who either microdose or do more than that.
Yeah.
And I just keep hearing this story of like, I just feel more connected to everything, and I can see the interconnections and interdependence.
Yeah.
To me, that's a really profound insight that you can certainly have apart from mushrooms, but the way that it seems like make it real for people.
Makes it very, very real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's what all good religion does, is helps us see that and live as if it's true, you know?
Yeah.
So let's go back. How did you get into comedy? And do you see any connections between either your earlier spirituality or your current spirituality and your approach to comedy or your experience of doing comedy?
That's a really good question. I think that, I mean, I do, the way I got into it is actually when I was sort of fairly fresh out of the faith and in the middle of a divorce and having moved to be near my daughter and you know have her half the time. It was, as much as it was the right thing, and I never regretted that. I did get into like a pretty dark space. Just didn't know, like I was like unemployed for a bit and just like, what am I doing? Like, I was in a really rough spot, and I was like, I need to do something. I was like, therapy? Nah, let's go do comedy. Mainly because I didn't have health insurance.
Wrong.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, wrong in a big way. But so I signed up for an open mic at the Comedy Zone in Charlotte, and just absolutely ate it. Just did really, really, really bad. I bombed as hard as I've ever bombed, for sure.
What were you doing for work at this time? Were you a teacher?
So no, at this point, oh, you know what? Actually, the first time I went, I had just been hired. So like, I hadn't started yet because it was still the summer.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was about to be a teacher, coming off of 6 months something of unemployment, a really, really rough, scary time. Yeah, and then I was like, all right, that was terrible. Let's try it again. And and then the second time, at least in my memory, I'm sure it wasn't as good as I remember, but certainly it felt like I absolutely, like crushed, like destroyed.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, we're doing this forever probably. And mixed bag ever since. So in a sense, yeah, I mean that's a transcendent feeling. There's something really special to that. So I guess I was maybe unconsciously filling a void there, and maybe still am, because there certainly is there's a sort of a different kind of interconnectedness, I feel like, with not interconnectedness so much as connection, like a solidarity. The sort of I like to avoid making comedy too noble, but
Oh, sure. Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
yeah, but when I do get in that, the farthest I'll go into that space is I do think that it makes people feel less alone, because it's like a lot of what's funny is recognition of something that you didn't know someone else thought. So
Yeah.
there's a certain mystical quality to that in a way.
Do you feel like doing comedy has changed you?
It must have. It has to have.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a...
Maybe for the worse.
Yeah, probably, honestly, yeah. No, it definitely has. I found a thing that I absolutely love doing and cannot imagine not doing. And so it's just a sense of purpose, even if just the purpose is just being happy, right? Even if it's not bigger than that. Yeah. By the way, I thought of another major milestone in what, talking about comedy made me think of this. Another major milestone in my faith sort of starting to go away was, I was in grad school, and I was in grad school for creative writing. So I wrote, my thesis was this like novella, like a long story novella, whatever. And then I turned that into a novel, an unpublished novel that no one read. And that it was about the experience of, there were like two main characters. One was essentially me, and then the other one was sort of an amalgamation of different people in the church that my dad was the pastor in, and then there was a character that's essentially my dad. And so that, I learned a lot about what I really believed by writing that thing. There was one character, it's this girl that the me character is like in love with, and I would find myself writing stuff that she said. It would basically be saying like, all of this is nonsense, all of this is fake, you're letting this run your life, blah 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 blah. And I realized at a certain point, like, oh, that I'm just her. I was like, I'm more her than I am the kid. Because I was writing out stuff. Because, at the end of the day, all of that's me. Literally every single thing is me. Because I'm the one writing it.
Right.
And I realized, like, oh, this is when my brain's lighting up the hardest when I'm typing the things she's saying, which are basically all like, you don't really believe this.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty huge thing that, I don't know. Art can do things to you.
Do you get into any of that stuff in your act?
I've had a remarkably difficult time doing that, which is kind of surprising to me, honestly, because it totally flowed out of me when I was writing the novel, and I have had a tremendously difficult time accessing that. for comedy, and I don't.
Oh, accessing it or like making it work and get laughs?
A little of both.
Okay.
Really,
Yeah.
really even finding, you know how when you're so close to something, you kind of you forget what parts are crazy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're just like, well, this is just. I'll tell people about stuff sometimes. And they're like, wait, what?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, you know
Yeah.
this, and they're like, no, no, I don't know what that is at all.
This isn't relatable?
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should do jokes about that. Has that been? I don't know.
Yeah.
Has that been your experience? I've been talking nonstop.
Yeah, no, that's hard. It's hard to talk about religion, spirituality, God, because it immediately puts people on the defensive, I feel like,
Yeah, especially in the South.
Yeah, yeah. So, I do it a little bit, but I pick and choose where I'll do that material.
Right.
And it's pretty hit or miss. So, but it's tough because it's something that's so a part of me.
Yeah.
So part of my life that I feel like, how do I not talk about this stuff?
Right.
And there's got to be a way to make it funny. And I think maybe I'm just not there yet like I don't have the skill yet.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So
not even that joke. I mean, I know you've been doing it for a long time, but it still really kills me every time. The one about is God a mommy or a daddy? Mm. I mean, I think, and I understand that that's not going to hit everywhere,
right?
But it is, I think, a like genuinely brilliant joke. Like it gets at really big, a really, really big question, really big topics, like in such an accessible way, you know? I don't know.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to do more stuff like that.
Yeah, right.
But
it's a tough sell.
It's a tough sell. It's also I have not written a joke that good in 5 years.
I would also agree with that. Yeah.
Thank you. So it's hard. It's hard, right. And when you're dealing with topics like that, it's just even harder to make it work. So
I'm trying to think like what stuff. I definitely have tried some stuff here and there that with, varying degrees of success, mostly not success.
Yeah.
I think I had one about how someone I was dating, and this is not directly true, but somewhat true. How someone I was dating broke up with me and then dated a youth pastor. In this part of my life, since I was not religious anymore, part of my life.
Yeah.
She broke up with me, and then it wasn't immediate. In the joke, I say she broke up with me for a youth pastor. That part's not true, but she not too long after that dated a youth pastor for a significant amount of time, and the joke. I mean, that's just kind of that fact is just funny by itself.
Yeah.
But I said a few things, one thing I say is you might be thinking, are you not a youth pastor? Right. And then the part that people really pull back on hard on is I talk about the breakup itself, which is not how it went at all, but saying, hey, listen, it's not you, it's him. Right? And that just, it doesn't, people are not, they're not down with it. They are not down with it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. I don't know why people wouldn't be down with that. But
I think just the concept of blaming something on God, people are not comfortable with.
Well, hard turn here, but do you think about death?
Oh yeah, constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That fear. I mean, I think I'm all the ways I talk about life and interconnectedness and universe and everything is very, very real, but I do have a sneaking suspicion that if I were to find myself at death's door today, I'd probably start praying to that God that I'm afraid of,
Huh.
I'd probably be asking for forgiveness for stuff. I'd probably be like, "Hey, like, we good?" um, like, I don't know, like, if that other thing is real, I'm so sorry for all the stuff I
Uh-huh.
said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think if I have to take my actual guess for what happens when you die, I think the lights go out.
Mm-hmm.
That's my real, turning off my emotions, turning off my fear, turning off my everything else, just pure logic brain. My guess is you're just done, and then but that energy goes somewhere, I guess.
How do you feel about that?
I'm mostly okay with that. I think. I think where it becomes troubling, deeply troubling, is to think about, and absolutely God forbid, but say it was my child,
Mm.
right? The idea of just not existing anymore, and this is really going to a place that might be uncomfortable for people to hear a person talk about, but I've thought about that before. Like the idea of just her just not existing anymore is pretty unacceptable to me.
Mm.
Like that
Yeah.
that I really can't. That's when it becomes problematic for me.
Yeah.
The idea of me not existing anymore is not. It's not without scariness, but that doesn't really terrify me.
Mm.
At least not at first glance. But I don't know. I don't know what happened. What do you think about it or feel about it?
I don't know anymore. I don't feel a lot of
Yeah, I don't either.
fear. I don't feel a lot of fear. I have some curiosity
Yeah,
about it. I don't worry about it too
yeah.
much
On the daily,
normally.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I feel like I used to more.
I don't know. I feel like I'm more open to it than I used to be when I was,
Yeah,
a fundamentalist.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not certainly in my daily life not nearly as scary as it used to be.
I don't like it. I will say that. Like it does feel, death still feels offensive to me.
Okay.
When someone close to me dies, it makes me angry.
So
And I'm like, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel
yeah,
like a proper part of how this should go.
that's interesting.
And that's at a pretty deep gut level. So
Yeah.
I do hope that ultimately life wins out
Okay. Like
over
there's like
death in some
like
way.
there's something going on.
I
Is
hope
a hope you
so.
have? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I really do because death does bother me.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah.
I actually for I've had stuff in my life, but I've really something that I kind of remember sometimes with a bit of a shock is that I've really not had anyone who I've been truly, truly, truly close with die yet.
Mm.
My grandmother died, and that was my grandma, but we really weren't very close.
Mm.
She's a good person, but she was more of almost like a figurehead of the
Mm.
family in a way, from my in my experience, and I don't think that's dishonoring to say. It's just what the
Yeah.
reality was of my
Sure.
relationship with her. So that was conceptually sad, but didn't really affect me in a deep way.
Yeah.
So I still don't know what that's going to do when that happens.
Yeah.
When the inevitable thing. It's kind of crazy that I'm 36 years old and haven't really.
That is surprising.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
like I just a truly very very close person has not died in my life yet.
Yeah.
So that is
That's one of the benefits of not having very many friends.
yep.
Bro, I'm at a funeral every week. I don't know what you're talking about, dude.
You're crushing it, man. You're crushing it.
Before we go, how do you want to be remembered?
I have thought about that. I'll tell you where death does get scary for me is the fact that I realize, like, unless you have some really really significant cultural significance, I think we all got about 50 years before no one remembers us at all.
Mm-hmm.
So really, honestly, I'd just like to be remembered for a little while. Um, uh, yeah, like I don't know. I want to be remembered for like stuff I do, like legacy, like comedy would be cool. I feel silly even saying that, but like, and just remembered fondly by people in my life. You know, I want them to be able to for their feelings to not be that complicated at the funeral. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's good.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't want the eulogies to include the words complicated. You know? That's it. Actually, I think that's it.
Oh, that's really good, because I've been to some funerals with complicated feelings, and that's great. Anything that you're really loving lately that's just been really meaningful to you? Like, it could be a book or a TV show or a poem or a practice that's
practice we talked about that.
Yeah.
It's been a huge thing for me.
That makes sense.
As far as like, you know, pieces of art goes, I don't know. I constantly have good things come. You know what? This is from a few years ago, but I rewatched it again recently. Patton Oswalt special from a few years ago. I Love Everything. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
That one, man, to me, that's one of the greatest specials ever.
Yeah.
And I actually was lucky enough. I was there. It was filmed in Charlotte.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. It was second row. Second row, and I was by myself because a weird semi-breakup thing was happening. That's a whole other story. But that was a profound experience to be there. But it's just a really, first of all, hilarious and just lovely special.
Yeah.
So that's if people want to see like comedy at its absolute height of what it can do, I Patton Oswalt special, I Love Everything. So good.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thanks, man. This has been fun.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Where can people find more of you and your comedy?
Yeah, Mr. Williams Comedy on TikTok and Instagram. It's super, super duper teacher heavy content, but people seem to like it. MrWilliamsComedy.com as well.
Okay.
I have dates up on there and stuff. So that's
Great.
what I got.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, dude. Thanks for having me.